This is the equal sign, but it wasn't always this way. If we lived in the 16th century, we would have no idea what it meant. Back then, if you wanted to express the simple mathematical concept of is equal to, you needed to write out the entire phrase. It was extremely inefficient, especially when you're doing algebra and the problems are getting more complex and your hand is quite frankly getting tired. But someone got sick enough of this that he had an idea. His name was Robert Record and he was a Welshman. In 1557, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna publish a book called The Whetstone of Wit, and it's going to be a pivotal textbook on arithmetic and algebra. And we respect his confidence because, as it turned out, it was. It was here that he introduced two perfectly parallel lines to become the equal sign. And so it was done. He saved everyone a bunch of ink and changed how we communicate mathematical ideas. Now, the next British genius on our list that we need to send a thank you card to is Isaac Newton. You've heard of him. You love him. He came up with a bunch of pretty important ideas related to the cosmos and gravity, which is cool, but he was also an Englishman who developed modern calculus. Actually, there's literally a calculus controversy about this, so we'll get into that in a minute, but he definitely should be credited with his contributions to the world's most confusing form of math. I took a calculus class one time, and while I did pass, I remember nothing besides I felt like I was writing more symbols than numbers. So we will leave that to those of you who are smarter than me. Anyway, Isaac Newton really helped come up with a framework for calculus that would help mathematicians start to describe phenomena like flow and acceleration and rates of change. Now, this is going to be a side story, but how often do you get to learn about calculus controversies? There's also a man named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He was German. He too is considered to have independently discovered calculus. Now, Leibniz published his findings first, but Newton supporters claimed that he plagiarized Newton's unpublished ideas because they had been in contact, like mathematical pen pals. Really, both worked on the technique for a long time before publishing, and actually, much of the symbols that are used today are not Newton's. They're from the German mathematician. And yes, they did argue about it at the time, and it was a huge intellectual controversy, the calculus controversy. Newton also started the drama and went out of his way to smear Leibniz's name in order to try and get full credit as the sole discoverer of calculus. Now, eventually, Newton was able to produce unpublished manuscripts that appeared to have proved that he worked on the subject before Leibniz, but today, in modern mathematics and just in modern life, considering they're both gone, typically they both get credit and it ends it in a tie. Then we have Ada Lovelace, who we've briefly mentioned before on this channel, but let's talk about how this woman broke into the boys' club of computing and mathematics. She was the daughter of poet Lord Byron and a very mathematically inclined woman named Anne Milbank. Mrs. Milbank was pretty much over the temperament of creative people after being married to one, and so she steered her daughter towards math and sciences. This was a very good thing for world progress because Ada had a very analytical mind. She worked with a man named Charles Babbage, who was a brilliant inventor, and they worked on one of the first iterations of the computer. In her notes on Babbage's machines, she came up with an algorithm for computing what are known as Bernoulli numbers, and this is widely regarded as the world's first computer program. She also created a foundation for a system that could not just crunch numbers, but could also understand symbols. And this is what helped computing systems eventually learn to create musics, generate graphics, and much more. It was true foresight before her time and was a pioneering contribution to modern computing. Now, the next major British mathematical contribution on our list has to do with O's and ones. If you're all familiar with coding and programming languages, you'll know that it operates on a lot of zeros and ones that look like this. Essentially, it's two binary conditions. It's true or false, on or off, 0 or 1. And the work on this language started with a man from Lincoln named George Boole. He wasn't actually formally educated in mathematics. He was self-taught and had pretty humble beginnings. But his logic was better than the rest, and he published a system in 1854 called An Investigation of the Laws of Thought. This system is now known as Boolean algebra, and it brought logical operations to mathematics to create a more formal framework for an abstract kind of math. He's basically considered the grandfather of the digital world, and historians have considered that his command of language — he taught himself Greek, French, German, and Italian, as well as being tutored in Latin — helped lead him to come up with Boolean logic and the kind of language-based underpinnings of a new mathematical format. Now, have you ever used a Venn diagram? Probably you have. I love them. They're simple, overlapping circles that visually represent relationships between different sets or groups, like these fun examples. They're a great way to display information, give lessons, and bring abstract theories into a more visual understanding. And they're all thanks to an English philosopher named John Venn in 1880. He was inspired by the work of a Swiss mathematician, and he built on his circles to come up with a tool that could even have 4 or 5 circles involved to show all of the potential interactions. And fun fact, he didn't actually name the Venn diagram after himself. The name was mostly used by a man named Clarence Lewis in 1918, so John Venn was also humble as well. Now, most Brits have heard of Alan Turing, and for good reason. He was a genius that profoundly impacted the 20th century when he played a pivotal role in Bletchley Park during World War II to help the British decipher encrypted German communications. He significantly helped shorten the war by his machine that cracked the infamous Enigma code, saving millions of lives. But even after wartime contributions, he came up with other things like the Turing test, which is a thought experiment designed to evaluate whether a machine's behavior can be indistinguishable from a human. This basically was the foundation of modern AI and prompted generations of researchers to explore machine intelligence. The sad story is that Alan Turing endured horrible persecution during his lifetime due to his sexuality, but he truly impacted modern-day computing, machine learning, and mathematics in a way that no one else has. And the last step on our list is something a little bit more modern. For over 350 years, one mathematical puzzle stood defiant. It haunted generations of mathematicians with its tantalizing simplicity and elusive proof. It's known as Fermat's last theorem. What the theorem was is not important, and by not important, I mean that I can't actually explain it because I don't understand, so I'll put it up here for you math whizzes. But the point is, there was essentially this age-old problem to solve, and the man who came up with it in 1637 hinted in the margins of a book that he had discovered a marvelous proof, but that the margin was too small for him to write it in. Enter a man named Sir Andrew Wiles, a distinguished British mathematician. He was driven by a childhood fascination with the theorem and dedicated himself to its solution. He embarked on a solitary and profoundly secret quest, working for 7 years, building on decades of advancements in number theory, elliptic curves, and modular forms. His initial public announcement of a proof in 1993 sent shockwaves through the mathematical community. A small but significant flaw was soon discovered, leading to a period of intense revision. With the crucial help of his former student Richard Taylor, Wiles finally completed and published his definitive corrective proof in 1995. He solved not only one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics, but he also revitalized public interest in the field. Now that brings me to the end of this video. Comment below and let me know what names I've missed. What other British contributions to mathematics have you heard of? I'd love to hear them. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.